Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell with News and Views from the Nefarium on Thursday, February the 16th, 2017. This is a weird one because I have to tell you, as you know, I go through my emails and decide what I want to do my blogs on and what I want to do the news and views on. And I had several contending stories for this week, but then one popped up that I have to talk about because it appears to me that there's, again, something funny going on, not only in the story, but in the way it's being reported, or I should say, rather, not being reported. Okay. I had a lot to choose from. I wanted to talk about the German gold. I wanted to talk about the Mike Flynn thing. I wanted to talk about some developments in India. But I have to admit, this one, you know me, I like high octane speculation. This one caught my eye. So we're going to begin with the Washington Post. Now, guys, you know me, I would rather spend an evening with the Clintons than read the Washington Post. But this is a story that appeared just yesterday. I want to read some parts of it to you, because there's a part of the story that popped out at me that was just mentioned in passing and then dropped like the proverbial brick. Okay, and then there were a couple of other stories that appeared kind of in the same time frame, and it convinces me once again there's something very strange going on. All right, so we'll lead off with the Washington Post story. This is by Joel Achenbach on February 15th. And the headline of this article is NASA heeding Trump may add astronauts to a test flight moon mission. Okay, and here we go. President Trump has indicated he wants to make a splash in space. During his transition, he spoke with historian Douglas Brinkley about John F. Kennedy's famous 1961 vow to go to the moon before the decade was out. Now Trump and his aides may do something very similar, namely, demand that NASA send astronauts to orbit the moon before the end of Trump's first term, a move that one Trump advisor said would be a clear signal to the Chinese that the U.S. intends to retain dominance in space. NASA already has a plan to launch its new Jumbo Space Launch System rocket with an Orion capsule on top in late 2018, a mission known as EM-1. No one would be aboard. The capsule would orbit the moon and return to Earth, splashing down in the ocean. But on Wednesday, NASA's acting administrator, Robert Lightfoot, sent a letter to employees saying he'd instructed top NASA officials for human spaceflight, Associate Administrator William Gerstenmaier, to explore the feasibility of adding astronauts to the EM-1 flight. Skip a paragraph again. At the same time, NASA officials and policy experts understand that Trump wants to do something dramatic. Scott Pace, head of the Space Policy Institute at George Washington University, said earlier this week, there is strong interest in finding significant near-term accomplishments that can be done in the first term. This would be another precursor to ultimately landing. And I think sometime within a second Trump term, you could think about putting a landing vehicle on the moon. Okay, so more of the same, guys. We've been hearing about this really since the first Bush administration, G.H.W. Bush, with his grandiose plans to get to Mars. And every president since then has, oh yeah, we got to get serious about space. But then, two more paragraphs here, which are getting us to the real story of the day, because it may or may not be space. We don't know. But Walker did not say such a mission would necessarily have to use NASA's SLS rocket and Orion capsule. Entrepreneurial space companies, including Elon Musk's SpaceX and Jeffrey Bezos' Blue Origin, are planning their own heavy lift rockets. Bezos owns the Washington Post, so here they're doing an article on it. Hey guys, hey Mr. Trump, you want to go to the moon? I've got a rocket. No inside influence peddling here, guys. Anyway, going on now with the article. Here's the paragraph that caught my eye. Newt Gingrich, an influential advisor to Trump when it comes to space issues, is among those pushing for a more entrepreneurial space program. In an email to the Washington Post, Gingrich, who said he was on a trip to Antarctica, blasted NASA for becoming an agency that avoids risk, and said the space program should leverage the enthusiasm and money of the many billionaires interested in commercializing space. Now, let me repeat the line that caught my attention here. In an email to the Washington Post, Gingrich, who said he was on a trip to Antarctica. Okay. So in other words, what I'm really concerned about here is that little in passing comment that the former Speaker of the House, former presidential candidate, Newt Gingrich, is on a trip to Antarctica. All right, now before we get carried away with my high octane speculation of the day, at the same time, and I've put these links up there for you, at the same time there were two CBS News pieces about Antarctica, and I want to read you the one that was written by A.J. Katz, and this would be February 12th, 2017. This is an article that appeared on the CBS site called CBS News' Mark Phillips reports live from Antarctica next week on climate change. And here we go, two paragraphs here. CBS News correspondent Mark Phillips arrived in Antarctica on Friday to report for CBS This Morning and CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley. His live reports and interviews from the bottom of the planet can be seen throughout the coming week and are part of the CBS News series The Climate Diaries. Okay, now we got to get all worked up about climate change, you know. And I'm sorry, folks. I'm a heretic. I'm just not a believer in all of this nonsense, particularly with their economic plans to gut the remaining middle class with their carbon taxes and weather derivatives. It's kind of a handy thing to have around when you can manipulate the weather. But let me skip down a couple paragraphs here because there is a very real concern. It says, what has Phillips seen so far? Quote, we're meeting scientists here who have worked in Antarctica for years and who say they're seeing new weather patterns which are causing changes in the landscape not seen for 10,000 years. All right. Unquote. Now, that caught my attention, not only because there's not a bit of mention about Newt Gingrich going to Antarctica, other than in the Washington Post, but it's that date of 10,000 years, because if you follow alternative research, that's the date that many alternative researchers give for some sort of planetary catastrophe. Most of them believe that that was some sort of version of the flood of Noah. But it's an interesting date because what that is implying is that the climate change is significant enough there that it could radically alter the climate of the planet. Now, we can get into discussions of mechanisms and so on and so forth. That's not really my intent here. My intent is to point out, well, why, with this focus on Antarctica, is there absolutely no mention of Newt Gingrich? Well, maybe the former Speaker of the House is going down there to study climate change, just like Secretary of State John Kerry did, all right? But let's remember who else has gone to Antarctica recently. The Patriarch of Moscow, Kirill III, former Apollo 11 astronaut Buzz Aldrin, and now we get the Speaker of the House. So what's going on? Here's what I suspect. There is clearly something going on. You cannot lump the following people as having concerns in Antarctica all being about climate change. And I've pointed this out over and over again. You can't lump in Rudolf Hess, Hermann Goering, Admiral Richard Byrd, Newt Gingrich, John Kerry, the Patriarch of Moscow, Buzz Aldrin, all being concerned about climate change, can you? There's something else going on down there, and it may have to do with recovery of artifacts or indications of ancient human history. It may have something to do with Atlantis. It may have something to do with UFOs. It may have something to do with meteors from Mars. Who knows? But the whole story is not climate change. What I suspect that we are seeing with the news coverage now being given to Antarctica by a major corporate controlled media outlet like CBS is that they are now trying to bring, number one, bring Antarctica to everybody's attention, but spin it in a way that's useful to the global elites, namely climate change and our need for carbon taxes and so on and so forth. This is how they're going to spin it, but it's a cover story for, in my opinion, for something else entirely that's going on down there. If you're going to present a comprehensive one explanation fits all the data model, climate change ain't it, because it does not rationalize the interests of the Nazis in the region prior to World War II. It does not rationalize the high jump expedition under Admiral Richard Byrd. It does not adequately explain the presence of the Patriarch of Moscow or an Apollo 11 astronaut. It simply falls flat as a mechanism of explanation. So they're going to have to figure out a different way to spin this. And my prediction is they are going to start talking about Antarctica in the mainstream, so-called mainstream corporate controlled media. And they're also going to try and label any attention to the other esoteric aspects of human interest in Antarctica as conspiracy theory. Nothing to see here. Move along, folks. Well, I'm sorry. Newt Gingrich is now in some very, very strange company. And the fact that the Washington Post article would mention his presence in Antarctica in the context of a major article about President Trump's space initiative and what his plans are, to me is a little suspicious without any further explanation as to why he's there or any further inquiry. All right, this to me is a very, very fishy story. It has that distinctive odor of high octane to it. So anyway, that's it for news and views this week from the Nefarium. I want to thank everybody, by the way, for all the articles this last week. I have been flooded, quite literally, with so many articles on so many different topics, and they're all good. I've been sorting through them for the last 2 days, trying to make some final cuts, and I still haven't made any final decisions. So I want to thank everybody for that. I want to thank all of you supporting the website, memberships and donations and so on. So we'll see you on the flip side. Bye-bye, and God bless.